Before I hand over proceedings to our speaker, let me very quickly introduce the purpose of this lecture series. As most of you may know, the Ad hoc Group 5, Food, Culture and Society of the Indian Sociological Society, is the youngest research committee in the making. It's still not one yet, and the purpose of this particular research group is to bring together scholars working on food from diverse perspectives, especially, of course, sociological and social anthropological. And we have had 3 monthly lectures already, and we had a very interesting set of presentations at the 49th All India Sociology Conference at BML Munjal University in December. And this is the first monthly lecture of 2025, which will be delivered by Dr. Ishita Dey on Off Access Biography of Sweet Encounters in West Bengal and Bangladesh. And to introduce Ishita, she is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Social Sciences, South Asian University, New Delhi. Her research interests are centered around migration, labor, food, and census. She has been working on the life of sweets and sweetness in South Asia, and she is a part of a collaborative project, Gastrofeminism. She has co authored an art research project on smells of the city, focusing on Delhi, supported by the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, Delhi, and will be showcasing her work in Food Lab, or rather, she has already done it in the Food Lab of the Serendipity Arts Festival, Goa 2024. She is an editorial board member of the journal Society and Culture in South Asia, and her work has been published in Contributions to Indian Sociology, The Sense in Society, Gastronomica, Refugee Watch, and South Atlantic Quarterly. She has co edited the book Sustainability of Rights After Globalization, and also Beyond Kolkata, The Dystopia of Urban Imagination, which is a co-authored book. Ishita, welcome, and I would like you to now take over. Maybe you can speak for 30 to 40 minutes, and after that we could have a Q&A.
Okay. So, first and foremost, really thank you, Dr. Padgiri, for anchoring this platform. It was much needed. And I just hope this platform existed for me when I began my research journey 2010. This would have also been given me and many other researchers on who are working on food a common. It's very important to have a platform to exchange ideas. As what Rituparna already mentioned, that this is a work that I'm presenting today is near completion, and it is a part of a monograph that have titled it Sweet Excess, and the monograph is going to be out sometime in 2025. And in this particular, so what I'm going to present to you is a central idea of the monograph. And I would request Dr. Padgiri to give me a heads up before 5 minutes before my time is up. So as Dr. Padgiri mentioned, my work has been to follow sweetness, and primarily I have worked in West Bengal and in Bangladesh. And this work that I'm presenting today began in the field work has been in 3 intermittent phases, but the work has begun in 2010, and the fieldwork is between 2010 to 2018 to 2018-19. So it's clearly a decade-long journey. And let me start off with one of my favorite vignettes from the field. Sister in your place, implying Kolkata, when you visit someone's house, you calculate the number of sweets. Here, that is not the practice. That is why the pricing of sweets is based on the kilogram weight. This is from my field notes, Dhaka, December 2017. The owner was right. In West Bengal, I was habituated to ordering the number of sweets based on the number of members in a household, their dietary restrictions, likes, and dislikes. Quickly, the owner rectified that it was not quite so in Bangladesh. He instructed the salesman to pack 2 kilograms of sweets and observed that it is quite common in Bangladesh to carry at least 2 to 3 kilograms of sweets while visiting a household. When I returned to my host family and I shared about this incident, she actually ended up laughing and commenting that my host could consume 1 kilogram of sweets, implying that what would that 2 to 3 kilograms of sweets is not really that much. I clearly kind of thanked in my mind the sweet shop owner for saving me from social embarrassment. My host family, my host family's interlocutor, she also commented that she carried up to at least 5 to 6 kilograms of sweets when she visited her parents' home and could never imagine buying sweets proportionate to the number of members in a household. I looked puzzled. She said, "You will get used to it when you finish the fieldwork." This vignette encapsulates the coded sociality of sweet exchanges that is specific to this side of Bengal, the Epar, and that side of Bengal, implying the Opar Bangla, the two Bangla words that capture the lived experience of borders for people in West Bengal and Bangladesh. It also reveals that sweetness cannot be restricted to a binary understanding of essential versus non essential, luxury versus necessity, because of the ubiquitous role of sweets, not only as an edible item of pleasure, but also of ritual value. Sweets are very integral to hospitality, right? Where starting from welcoming to greeting a guest, and there is a very evocative Bangla word for consumption of sweets as part of the hospitality, which is called mishti mukh. Now, this evocative Bangla phrase literally means sweetening one's mouth, but it is also a phrase that is used to exchange sweets in everyday greetings and starting from all sorts of auspicious occasions, including all sorts of life cycle rituals from birth ceremonies to death ceremonies. So the Bangla word for sweets that we use on both sides of Bengal is mishti. As an adjective, it implies a sweet demeanor. And similar to Japanese culture, and there's a fantastic work by John Holtzman, the word mishti is also used to describe feminine attributes across West Bengal and Bangladesh. At the same time, sweet is also used as an adjective for taste. As a noun, it is used for desserts. I use the word sweets throughout my work to imply mishti, a classificatory term for desserts made from milk, milk base, other cereals, fruits, vegetables, and sweetening agents. The monograph is about crafting sweets, crafting mishti, understanding meanings of sweetness in a shared geography of West Bengal and Bangladesh that has been ruptured by partition, liberation war, and most importantly, a region whose food history is ravaged by famines and a geography that was once at the heart of sugar capitalism till 1870. It is about the social and cultural meanings of a food item with little or no nutritional value. And Michael Crondall, in his fantastic book on deserts, observes that from a biological point of view, and I quote, desert is frivolous, unnecessary, and even harmful in excess. And yet, precisely this is why it is interesting. The only anthropological work on sweetness that we have in India is by Anil Kishore Sinha. And in his work, he shows that that any sweet is, and particularly the sweets that are consumed within India, are not at all consumed for their nutritional value. And this is precisely why sweetness becomes an interesting category to look at when it comes to food and diet cultures. In this ethnographic work on mishti making, what I've tried to do is unpack how a food item with very minimal nutritional value continues to dominate the foodscape of Epar and Opar Bangla. It is about, therefore, an understanding of sweetness has to emerge from studying the practice of sweetness. And how do we study the practice of sweetness? We need to study the practice of sweetness in its making and in its consumption. In my work, I have looked at the act of making in the sweet shops. In the sweet shops, in houses, how making of sweets have been represented in cookbooks, in cooking shows. So this is what the spectrum is about. At the same time, when we talk about the practice of sweetness, we cannot ignore the fact that, like many craft based food commodities, even the making of sweets has a certain association with caste and class. Therefore, when we come to the understanding of practice of sweetness, it is very much about the caste based hierarchies, religious order. At the same time, all of us know, along with this caste class making of sweets, there is also a looming danger about the threat that comes with consumption of sweetness, particularly the associated risks of health. Therefore, what my book tries to attempt to capture is to understand the material and symbolic significance of sweetness, changing meanings of labor form rooted in caste religious hierarchies, positioning of sweets within the nutritional understanding, and finally about its status as a cultural marker. What I plan to do today is to tell you that how have I conceptualized sweetness in my work. How do we theorize sweetness through the life of Mishti in Epar and Opar Bangla, whose base material has always been considered in the statist imagination as an essential food item. Most of us in the audience are aware that quote unquote, and Bengali, I'm putting it within quote unquote, the Bengali sweets is known from the milk base, which is one of the milk bases, the coagulated milk mass, which is acidification of milk by curdling, which is called the chana. The other one is milk cream, where the milk cream is the milk froth is sedimented and it's used, and the third is that of khoya, which is the desiccated milk. Sweetness, as I propose in my book, has to be understood through a deeper engagement of what I have called in the title of today's presentation, the biography of sweets, and a framework that moves beyond, that pushes the debates on food beyond essential versus non-essential, needs versus luxury. In my book, I suggest registers of sweetness in Epar and Opar Bangla, a region which has been ravaged by famine, distress, and a long struggle to achieve milk sufficiency, must be understood through the lens of excess. Alongside the role of sucrose in the colonial expansion, which is Sidney Mince's work, sugar capitalism, which is historian Bosmer's work, my ethnographic engagement with everyday practices of sweetness suggests a need to understand how sweet excess reproduces itself through material and symbolic meanings. The very mention of mishti evokes three names. One is a fermented sweet dish made from milk, one a sweet made from a cooked paste of milk base called chana, and the other that is soaked in sugar syrup, again made from chana, which is called the roshagulla. What you clearly see here is that when we think about the climate that is conducive for milk, clearly, and this is what I take from Michael Crondell's work, Michael Crondell rightly observes that most of India does not have a climate conducive to long storage of fresh milk, and indeed most milk is processed before it is consumed. In West Bengal and Bangladesh, the two milk bases that are available widely, one is coagulation of milk through sour agent, and the other is Khoya milk. In addition to these two popular milk bases, we also have something called a stiff layer of milk cream called the shore. Now, to understand the affinity of milk-based sweets, we clearly can go through the ritual meanings of sweets, but at the same time, we also need to remember that we did not experience milk sufficiency, or we do not, for the longest time in our history. If you really look at the data of the milk production in India witnessed a meteoric rise only between 2014 and 2022, with India becoming the highest milk producer in 2021 and 2022, as per the Food and Agriculture Organization statistics. We all know about the Operation Flood, the criticisms around it, but at the same time, what is important, and this is what I want to flag, that 50%, more than 50% of the milk that came from the producing households was converted into sweets in both West Bengal as well as Bangladesh. What has been the journey of milk production in West Bengal? West Bengal, along with the other part of the country, became part of the Operation Flood ever in the first phase of the Operation Flood itself. You clearly see that government of West. You clearly see that there was a very vibrant cooperative movement that gets reflected in West Bengal's dairy sector, and you see a significant rise of per capita availability of milk from 2001 to 2014 to 2015. Despite all this data, what you clearly see here is that as far as dairying sector in West Bengal is concerned, around one of the huge hindrance that the dairying sector is actually the sweet industry, because most of the milk producers wants to sell the milk to the sweet industry because it fetches a better price. What marks dairying sector in West Bengal from other states is that dairy cooperatives are able to procure 5.4% of the marketable surplus milk, compared to around 16% of marketable surplus milk by the dairy cooperatives in other parts of India. One of the major markets of utilization of marketable surplus milk is the milk-based industry that is one of the main supply chain industry of the sweet industry, which is the chana industry. So one of the major markets of the utilization of surplus milk is the chana industry. And there are two districts in West Bengal, Hooghly and North 24 Parganas, which are known as the chana supplying districts. Similarly, when we come to Bangladesh, in Bangladesh also kind of within the dairy economy, it is known as the traditional milk trader model, and most smallholder milk producers end up selling milk directly to the consumers or milk middlemen, who then further supply milk to sweet shops. There are various studies and data to indicate that even though northern Bangladesh is known for milk production because of various ecological reasons, even akin to India's Anand model, the first 5-year development plan of Bangladesh encouraged a cooperative dairy model to increase milk production and systematization of milk supply and milk processing. The cooperative that is now synonymous as a prominent brand name in the dairy sector in Bangladesh is Milk Vita. Since Milk Vita, there are several other dairy brands that have been introduced, and many of these dairy brands have also tried to introduce sweets, but sweet shops remain a separate entity amidst the growing dairy industry and continues to remain one of the key consumers of the traditional models of dairy system. In fact, there is sufficient data to suggest that much of the milk that is produced in both Bangladesh as well as West Bengal goes to the sweet industry. This was also affirmed particularly during the pandemic, when there was a lockdown and sweet shop owners the sweet shops were allowed to remain open so that the milk would not go waste. And this is very, very important to kind of understand the relationship between this essential ingredient, this essential commodity, and the life of Mishti in West Bengal and Bangladesh. One immediate question, therefore, remains: if sweets, they do not fulfill the nutritional value, why are people drawn to them? That is one question we could ask. We could also ask, how do societies end up creating a culture of sweets amidst food related distress, and particularly to this audience, the food related distress, particularly the hunger and starvation deaths due to famine of 1943, etc., is not unknown. And we are also familiar with the food movements that happened in 1949 and 1956. As far as our public distribution system is concerned, another key ingredient of the sweet industry, which is the sugar, prominently figures in our ration cards, in our rations, right? So both in India, including West Bengal, and in Bangladesh, sugar really remains one of the subsidized commodities, right? So you clearly have milk and sugar, these two key ingredients, as part of the statist interpretation of what an essential food is. Now, the statist interpretation of essential food is based on what is necessary for sustenance and survival. However, the socio-cultural understanding of nutrition need not always run contrary to statist position. Sugar is available at low prices in ration shops across India, and time and again, Bangladesh government has provided sugar subsidies. Both milk and sugar come under the legal provisions to safeguard essential commodities across India and Bangladesh. At the same time, despite this statist interpretation about these two commodities of milk and sugar, no cuisine can be imagined without deserts. If you really think about the 5 desert superpowers, and Michael Crondell does this beautifully in his book. He documents the 5 desert superpowers and follows the path of the sugarcane crop to outline the desert cultures of India, Middle East, Italy, France, Austria, and the United States. The question that continues to intrigue researchers across disciplines on food: how do we make sense of obsession with sweetness in human civilization? So the existing studies, be it Sidney Mintz, Sidney Mintz has explored sweetness through colonizer-colonized relations. John Holtzman has looked at the feminine meanings rooted in the word of sweetness, particularly in Japanese culture. Then how sweetness contributes towards health risk. Third, the changing meanings of craftsmanship. And what you clearly see is that what are the notions of craftsmanship that are associated in the region-specific confectionery industry across the globe. So you have fantastic work emerging from within the range of chocolates, to the way in which cheese is used in desserts, etc. Yet, in all of these relations, ideas of sweetness clearly remain confined about how our taste is controlled, expanded either by colonial power, corporate structures, and post-industrial societies. What remains missing is how sweetness has survived through its practice in everyday life, in its coded sociality informed by ritual meanings, okay? And this ritual meanings could be both by the fact that sweets are offered in various rituals, artisanal labor, or standardizing value. And ritual meanings, artisanal labor, and standardizing value remains core of my book chapters. What I show in my book is through sweet shops, fairs, festivals, recipe books, food writings, that how a reading of sweetness will remain incomplete if we try to understand how social norms allow room, if we that a reading of sweetness remains incomplete if we try to understand how social norms allow room for too much. And this is where I'm looking at Zygmunt Bauman. How does one make room for sweets priced at rupees 1 to ornate sweets which can go up to rupees 2,000 to 10,000 as well? How do we make sense for the love of sweets and the pride with which people claim to consume 1 kilogram of sweets in a country that constantly makes to the news due to malnutrition and other hunger index? How does one understand the parallel coexistence of sweetness amidst drought, malnutrition, hunger, rather than conceptualizing sweetness as a luxury food and not as an item of necessity? I argue sweetness is an excess. What do I mean by excess? I quote from Gail Rubin. There's a fascinating line of Gail Rubin in that famous essay, Traffic in Women. Hunger is hunger, but what counts as food is culturally determined and obtained. The Bangla word for sweets, mishti, is a classificatory term for both desserts and as well as refers to a pleasant, mild-mannered nature. In West Bengal and Bangladesh, sweets occupy an iconic status, and it plays an important part in socio-religious celebrations observed by the Hindu and the Muslim communities and also in non-religious occasions. There are some sweets like shirni made from a base material of rice flour, wheat flour, which is also has roots in syncretic religious tradition. A sweet shop sells at least 6 to 7 varieties of sweets and sometimes up to 70. These sweets are made from a range of milk bases, along with savory items made from refined flour and gram flour. Sweetening agents vary from refined sugar to seasonal date palm jaggery to sorbitol, the aforementioned sugar, one of the most popular sugar substitutes that are used. Sweets are also made from milk bases, which are highly perishable, which means that the cost of sweets is really high, and there's a great propensity to also there is a great chance of material going waste. The shelf life of a chana is really short, and therefore, moment the chana supplies come in the evening, and the sweets are made throughout the night, and in the morning, the sweet shops are ready to sell its product. This is the everyday life of a sweet. Now, new flavors have been added to sweets. Since my early days of fieldwork in 2010, my interlocutors have constantly spoken of the cultural relevance of sweets in the food culture and the increasing prevalence of a new category of sweets that have emerged, which is called the kom mishti. Kom means less, which means that it is less sweet. Kom mishti literally implies less sweet. As a leitmotif, it allows us to locate an affection for sweetness alongside a recognition of the health risk it poses. At the same time, it helps us to comprehend a refusal to abandon sweetness and find a healthy balance for sweetness without risking one's health. Paradoxical statements such as I tested positive for sugar, I need to control my sweet intake, and an insistence on greeting visitors with sweets and statements such as have a little, it won't do any harm, are part of the everyday vocabulary of exchange of sweets. And people have developed their own ingenious ways of navigating sweetness by this nomenclature of less sweet sweets available in every sweet shops, which could be made from sugar substitutes to just lesser degree of sugar in the sweet. And this is where and the nomenclature of there is a different ways in which that there are different nomenclatures of sweets that are used for West Bengal and Bangladesh. I'm not going into those details, but let me quickly tell you that what you clearly see here is that most of the sweet biographies that we look at clearly kind of tells us of a history of patron-client relations. And I can go into one or two sweet biographies in the question answer session. What you clearly see here, what you clearly see when it comes to the mapping of the sweet industry is that of the three milk bases that I told you, chana is the most celebrated, debated signature ingredient that is associated with the sweet industry. There are several legends of origin associated with the origin of chana. Some claim that there was some inspiration from all the colonial influence that we have had in Bengal. So one is that history. There are also claims that it was always used as a savory food item, and this is something that you find in Chaitanya's biography. And what we when our understanding that when you clearly have but what you clearly see is that there is a liter of milk, and it's when chana gets converted from a liter of milk, there's clearly a lot of milk that is not getting used, right? And this has also attracted a lot of debate, and this I explore in a chapter on the milk control orders. But this also pushes us to think that what do we learn from sweetness as sociology students? And this is where I propose that one of the lens through which sweetness possibly could open up ways of understanding the social is how every civilization has its own way of creating and nurturing excess in various material forms. When we see it through the lens of Mishti, I argue sweetness acquires a new meaning. Sweetness is a celebration of life of excess. At the height of famine in 1784, under the aegis of Food for Work, Nawab Asafuddaulah of Awadh began the architectural marvel of Bada Imambara and Rumi Darwaza in Lucknow. The intent and material form of these sites have shifted with how they have come to be perceived by the Archaeological Survey of India, the post-colonial state, and travelers as signposts of the past, more specifically as a signpost of Lucknow with a specific kind of royal lineage. Ingraham defines architecture as a contingent excess. Building upon George Bataille's work, Excess, she argues that for Bataille, excess is the non-recoupable economy of wasted energy and excessive consumption produced by capitalism. And there's a danger to how it can produce useless spectacles, overwrought monuments, unquote. She's cautious about the potentialities of excess as waste generating, however, and shows that in case of architecture, not everything is pointless consumption. Excess is also recoupable. And it is this idea of excess is recoupable that becomes very useful to understanding sweetness. Excess and its associated meanings in social science scholarship can tilt the balance towards studying social problems, not only from the viewpoint of scarcity. And this applies to food studies, that scarcity is a very, very important lens. But how do we also understand celebration, etc., in geographies where scarcity has been a part of the history, but people also enjoy, people also kind of consume food items for pleasure. And this is where I place the debate on sweetness, and I say that this shift facilitates creation of a benchmark of measures, that is not built on an idea of a minimum point of view. If you really look at the much of the social welfare around food, it is built on an idea of a minimum a point of view, be it around the food rations, midday meals, or food for work programs. Pushing any discourse on maximum is off limits, except for associating excess with theories of leisure, consumption, and desire. We have scholarship from Chinese capitalism that shows that the drive towards overproduction led to the coexistence of structure of abundance and structure of want, and that desire is not always based or built on a basis of lack. And here, I would like to borrow from Pungai's work, who kind of shows to reconsider the economy of lack and to suggest not falling prey to theory of abundance devoid of historicity and spatiality. History is very central to understanding how cultural economies of excess are lived, embodied, and renewed. However, at the heart of the idea of excess uh, is the idea of renewal and regeneration, or what Bataille would call growth. In his discussion on excess, Abbott feels that for Bataille, the starting point is a cosmic consumption of excess and growth that paves the way for extending life processes and consuming excess. Excess, in other words, constitutes the making of the social. And this is something we clearly have a cue in Marx, who shows that Marx incorporates the idea of excess in his discussion on the reproduction of labor and concludes that beer and wine are necessary wants for the English and French working class. Gail Rubin, commenting on Marx's notions of reproduction of labor, argues that even Marx made room for cultural registers in his category of necessary wants. Summing up the idea of Marx's reproduction of labor, Gail Rubin feels three conditions are necessary to the central of reproduction of labor. One is biological needs, second is physical conditions, and third is cultural conditions. Marx observes the necessary wants are contingent on the civilization of the country and the habits, and therefore, when it comes to determination of labor power, one has to take into cognizance a historical and moral element. So, accounting for beer and wine as integral to the working class life as necessary wants had to constantly legitimize themselves as essential. While I don't want to conflate the idea of necessary wants with necessities, it seems like excess and its meaning making will always find legitimacy through the language of essential commodities and cultural register. For Marx, beer and wine were the necessary wants, and the cultural register was the country's civilization. An excess item, and this is what I like to emphasize. An excess item is not to be treated as luxury or abundance. While sweets and sweetness carry notions of status and prestige, it would be wrong to presume all sweets are items of conspicuous consumption or taste for necessity, the category from Bourdieu. Bourdieu clearly shows that working class families were guided by the choice of the necessary that guided the taste for necessity. Through a detailed empirical survey of food, entertainment, Bourdieu established that the choice is a forced one and is not naturalized. So, taste for necessity is a useful analytical framework for understanding how cultural capital reproduces itself through cultural markers. But at the same time, there is room for addressing the following concerns. Can the framework of taste for necessity include cultural items beyond necessity? If it includes any items beyond necessity, will it be embracing the bourgeois taste? The varied nature and form of sweetness and its allied meaning-making processes show that items of excess need not at all be categorized as luxury items. And this is something that we find in a detailed discussion on luxury foods. Sweetness, I argue, has to be perceived as an excess and not as an abundance or luxury. Three registers become central to studying sweetness as excess. One is the cultural registers of excess. Second is the aesthetization of excess. Third is the sustenance tropes in the imagination of excess. Within the ambit of cultural registers of excess, the meaning making surrounding sweets revolves around their ritual significance, symbolism inherent in the everyday codes of hospitality, and most importantly, their status as gifts in various ritualized forms of exchange. Excess lives through the exchange of sweets as it switches between gift, commodity, and gift. Despite the ritual status and popularity of sweets, there's a constant fear that lurks within the sweet industry because of their perishable nature, the associated health risks, and the rising concerns about diabetes. Most importantly, the conversion of essential food items such as milk and sugar into sweets. Compounded, this feeling of loss is embedded in the idea of Mishti's relevance in the gastronomic calendar could be justified through a cultural logic and how it has provided as a source of livelihood attached to the industry. And it is this sort of a it is, and I would like to conclude with this last statement, that what you clearly see here is that it is precisely this cultural logic that has helped the artisan labor of the sweet in that has helped the artisan labor to kind of it is precisely this it is precisely this sort of a cultural heritage that is constantly helped the sweet industry to fight back amidst various setbacks. The constant emphasis on its value in creation through caste-based labor hierarchies, aesthetic policies also includes how creativity ends up accommodating excess. Creative laborers, in this case, the craftsmen associated with sweet making, take immense pride in producing an aesthetic object which is not everlasting. And this is very, very important that they constantly take pride in the fact that we work with an item that is short shelf life. At the same time, it is a food item that is of immense value in terms of cultural significance as well as ritual significance. As artisans across EPAR and OPAR and confectioners have reminded me constantly, in this line of work, workers don't taste. They can see and tell is one of the oft used phrases that also communicate the synesthetic reason that is critical to mishti making. Therefore, sweetness, studied through excess, reveals the significance of how the labor forms of continuity and tradition are evoked in multiple ways to resist and negotiate with the changing forms of standardization and claim making that is looming large, especially with the push to standardize any form of a food products as well as GI markers. And I conclude here.
Thank you, Ishita, for that lecture and for explaining the nitty-gritties of sweetness, which was very, very interesting to listen to. So now I open the floor to questions, comments, and discussions. If anyone has a question, you may please unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can also put it in the chat box.
Yeah, sorry, actually I missed the middle portion because of like unstable internet, but I don't have a question. I just have a comment which is like, so similar, like few years ago, like a decade ago, there was this huge debate on BPL, and they were calculating the like they said like 26 rupees per day or 32 rupees per day is the minimum like bare minimum that's needed to reproduce oneself. So it's interesting that like you talked about excess and the reproduction, and then like so many people pointed out that they missed tea and tobacco, which is like which is considered as like excess or like something non-essential, but like it's crucial for the working class to consume, or people who are living close to the poverty line to consume tea and tobacco, because it suppresses hunger, and like they can skip one meal literally if they consume tea or tobacco. So and it's interesting that like I found it like some corollary between what you said and then like the debate that happened like 10 15 years ago. I didn't think that I couldn't I didn't think that it can be sweet can be I was also similar opinion that sweet is considered something non-essential, but like how things like tea or tobacco and sweet can be considered as part of the essential uh, routine actually. Yeah, crucial for reproducing oneself basically.
Can I respond,
Yes,
Rana?
yes, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So no, Sabri, precisely this is where I started kind of thinking that because when we look at food, the first thing that we are taught is this binary of what is essential, what is non-essential, and this binary has been there in the statist imagination of food, and particularly when I was looking at the milk control orders. And there's this fantastic issue on documents that has come out recently in Contributions to Indian Sociology, where I study the milk control orders, and much of the debates on milk control orders is actually telling that that this halwais and where the halwai, the sweet shop owners in Bengal, they are being blamed for wasting milk, which is a nutritional food item that they pay a higher price, and that's why women and children do not get enough milk in the summer months. And it's very interesting to see the debates that are happening in UP, that in summer months it is primarily being said that the milk should not cross the borders of Delhi UP borders, right? So that because there is a crisis and shortage of milk. And this is where that Michael's Crondell's that statement that clearly, when we think about Bengal, when we think about Orissa, when we think about this entire eastern belt, the kind of climate that we have, it is not very conducive to milk industry. Yet, how do we have this thriving chana industry? And this is where the question of caste really becomes important, right? Today today I could not devote any time because I really want to emphasize on this, on shifting this axis of looking at food. That can we also push ourselves to look at food not only from the lens of scarcity, but that how have people used livelihood and made a meaning out of food beyond scarcity, particularly and this is where I think the lens of excess. So you're absolutely right, and that's when I started thinking, what other food items apart from sweets, uh, you know can sweets be comparable to any other food items? And this was also one of the questions that came about when I defended my thesis quite some years ago. And this is what probed me, that initially I started to look at cheese, but cheese has a very very different life, different sort of a history of its making. And I was constantly getting stuck at the question of caste. And this is, you're absolutely right. And this is where that Marx's that line, beer and wine gave me a way out to really think through that what are the sort of food items do people consume for pleasure. And in that consumption of pleasure, and this is where, and sweets really became useful then to think through, that you have a 1 rupee sweet that people will offer to gods in the same site, in the same sweet shop, is selling 1 rupee sweet on ritual occasions, right? It's a signature sweet which is made with a little shortcut ingredients, cheap ingredients. It's sold for 1 rupee to be offered to the temples, and the same variation is sold at rupees 20 per piece. How does one understand this as a social phenomenon?
Right, and that's a very interesting thought. And we have one more raised hand by Anugya Nag. Maybe you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, can you hear me now? Sorry, I was not able to unmute myself.
Yes,
Mm.
yes.
Great presentation, Ishita. I've been following your work for quite some time, and it's always so fascinating to listen to the kind of work that you have done. And I can see the kind of range that you cover. And of course, it's there's so much to absorb from your work. But I'm kind of curious to kind of position this framework that you adopt, which is the framework of the excess. And I was trying to think it through the kind of two extremes that we have, particularly in terms of understanding the two Bengals and its style of cooking. I mean, and I'm really talking very broadly over here. West Bengal cuisine being associated with being more sweet and being higher on the sweeter quotient. But do we really kind of understand the politics of sweetness and the excess associated with it when it comes to generally an understanding of the two styles of cuisines, the two Bengals that we are constantly trying to kind of one kind of blur the differences, but at the same time maintain some differences and some uniqueness of our own. And on the other side, you have this idea that the Opar Bangla food is often jhal, which is spicier and hotter. So this contrast, and I'm sure there is a caste angle to it. Did you come across when you were conducting your research and ethnography? Did you come across this binary of the sweet, the mishti, and the jhal, complicating some of your observations of, for instance, how caste is very much associated in with this whole capital of sweet making and sweet consumption. Yeah, that's precisely my. I mean, it's just kind of a long, convoluted kind of a thought, but I just wanted to flag it.
No, it's a very very important question. I skipped that entire discussion around how the nomenclature of sweets that is there in that I came across during my field work in Bangladesh. Now this is where that's why I opened the monograph with that vignette, because you would assume that this quantum of sweets that is one expected to carry, right? Um, Clearly kind of tells about the taste for sweetness also there, like the taste, and again, if even if we don't go into the cooking of the savory items, even the taste for sweetness is marked very differently from epar and opar. So when I was doing fieldwork in Rajshahi division of northern Bangladesh, I was constantly told that you are from opar and you have a propensity for sweets which are less sweet, which are called mishti, right? In West Bengal, when I was doing fieldwork in Krishnagar, which is a border district, which is one of the border districts, I was told that your taste for sweetness clearly gives clearly is more towards less sweet, towards dry sweet, towards moist sweet, because you have not grown up in a rural Bengal where people like where people. This is what I was told by one of the interlocutors. Your taste is a dead giveaway that you have grew up in an urban area. When I went to Chapai Nawabganj, and there's a beautiful sweet which goes by the name of Chom Chom. That is what Chapai Nawabganj is a place in the northern part of Bangladesh in Rajshahi division. And Chapai Nawabganj is known for this sweet, which is a soft sweet made from a chana base, but the coating of the sweet is actually desiccated khoa, crushed khoya, and there's a coating of a thick sugar syrup. One of the very important preservation that is techniques that is used in the in the sweet industry across both sides of Bengal is the different consistencies of sugar syrup. Before refrigeration, it is the consistencies of the sugar syrup that actually kept the sweet intact, right? If you really look at this, the thickness of the sugar syrup, okay, it clearly tells you how the quantum of sugar, the proportion of sugar and water that must have gone into it, right? And all of us are aware in this audience that it was any sweet industry here clearly did not start with refined white sugar, which means people were actually playing with their indigenous sugars. And you clearly see that when it comes to this excess, this idea of excess, that we are that we celebrate excess better than you, we don't even go into the entire cuisine of Bangladesh and cuisine of West Bengal. It is very evident within the sweet map itself. I don't know if I'm able to communicate this part, right? That, our sweet is more sweet. So there are these various statements that are there in the book. Our sweet is more sweet. People from Rajshaya are claiming with pride. And this pride is a claim towards that excess. So, and it is also not only a claim towards that excess when it comes to, it's also towards a certain celebration of a certain skill set that we have, that we can work with excess. This is also what I want to hint at. It's not only merely a symbolic thing, it's very much that excess is built into our life world. And if you, of course, the argument can be expanded that excess is so much built into a life world. There are often these jokes, and there are these various jokes about the people of Calcutta that I've heard in Bangladesh, that we do not buy separate pieces of fish, we buy an entire fish, which clearly says that we can work with excess. There is this history of scarcity, but we work with excess, with abundance as well.
Right. Thank you, Ishita. There's one question in the chat box.
Yeah.
In Oriya culture also sweet is considered as a status symbol, and if you're going to any relative's house, then the person is being judged by how much kilo and is it made from only sugar or milk is also discussed. Recently, people are also talking about using white sugar or jaggery. But does
Right.
it matter in which places, caste, and class group it is spreading and discussed? And what about various food blogs, podcasts that are also talking about what to consume? Does it have a positive influence?
See, as for, there is a sort of increasing awareness about the kind of sugar, the source. Like there is a sort of an increasing awareness that whether refined sugar is better or jaggery is better, right? But at the same time, if you really look, and this is where the question of caste and class really comes about, that when we look at commercially produced sweets, jaggery is seasonal in nature. At least the kind of there is at least in the sweet industry of Bengal, the jaggery that is used, that is very seasonal. It is also very expensive, right? So when it comes to this how when it come and when we think about less sweet sweets, it is not only about the component of the sugar, it is also about using less sugar, but can you keep the shelf life of a product intact? Do you get my point, right? Because the more you increase the sugar content, you end up increasing the shelf life of a product. But at the same time, there is always there, and I think there are a lot of food blogs, etc., right now, who are emphasizing or who are coming up with recipes, which are say jaggery based, which are using other there are a lot of this recipes also using just dates. So recently I came across a recipe which suggested that why don't you replace jaggery also with just date and chana and make a sweet. Now when you think about it, date is also an expensive product, right? And which clearly hints at that who is able to afford the quote unquote healthy source of sucrose. If there is a sort of a nutritious source of sucrose, who is able to afford that healthy this thing? Because the refined white sugar clearly remains one of the cheapest, also has a long history of subsidy. Yes.
Right. Okay, Khushbu Datta has also raised her hand. So if you would like to ask your question, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, hello everyone. If you find Bengali sweets, the chana made and the rice flour made, basically the sandesh, are some of the products that can be consumed in a larger extent. People who prefer gluten friendly and often vegan, they also prefer that. And another thing and experience I had was I came across a person who is now a practicing diabetologist. He said that he comes from Modak caste, and who were actually street hawkers who sell sweetmeats at home, if I'm right. So there's a caste thing in it, and this can be studied also, no?
So there is an entire chapter in the book that is coming out on how sweet making was rooted in the caste class hierarchy. And you're absolutely right. The name of the caste group that is associated in Bengal with sweet making is Modak slash Moira caste. And however, I would like to emphasize that the sweet making as a profession has diversified beyond the Modak and Moira caste. There are people from other backgrounds who are there are people from other backgrounds who are now part of the sweet making. But what is important here is that there is a shift that has happened. Most of the sweet shops who are owned by the Modak caste, they are the artisan entrepreneurs. But who are the karigars making the sweets? And in this chapter, I show that it is people, at least during the course of the fieldwork on this side of Bengal, I have encountered that it is people who are from the caste groups who were traditionally associated with milk. They have now joined the line of karigars and karigari. In my fieldwork, apart from Kesidas, I have not come across any sweet shops who have hired workers who are non-Hindu workers. Kesidas Bangalore has an industrial unit. It's completely mechanized. It's almost completely mechanized. They have a quality control lab, and they have always had a history of hiring workers who are not both Hindu workers as well as non-Hindu workers. And even though I say that there has been a diversification beyond the Modak caste in the sweet shops, uh, it is, and this is where I think this is why I say that celebration of excess is it also happens through a certain legitimization in the cultural register, that sweet shops always have hired Hindu workers with an assumption that with an assumption sweets are also offered in various Hindu festivities. But this is what when it comes to Hindu workers, this is only in West Bengal. In Bangladesh, the same Moira caste is not what people associate. Okay, this is very interesting. This is why I started my fieldwork in Bangladesh, because I was faced with a question whether it's the same caste group that was associated with sweet making. In 2017, when I did my first Reiki visit in Bangladesh, I entered the Bangladesh Sweet Manufacturers Association's office in Dhaka, and I meet Animesh Shaha, and I'm telling the names because these are important indicators of caste, religion. And I ask that, are there shops owned by the Moiras? And he tells me who is a Moira. Whereas all the intellectuals whom I had written to, that whether Moira is a used word, is a locally used word, they had all said, yes, Ishita, Moira is the word. Even the caste census, etc., was also telling Moira. But when you actually go in the field, what is interesting there is that in Bangladesh, and this is this chapter on making sweets in the book. When the book comes out, you can read it. There's a chapter which kind of says, where I begin with this vignette with this line, Ghoshera mishti banai, Ghoshes make sweets. So how a surname becomes indicator of an entire caste group. And I'll just take 1 minute, but I would also like to clarify, Ghosh is one of the many surnames of the Goala caste group. And in Bengal, the surname is not necessarily the caste name, because Ghosh as a surname can be used for across many caste groups. But this line that I came across in Bangladesh, like quite in Rajshahi division, oh, Ghoshes make sweets, which also tells about how sweet making, at least what their oral history tells them, is that there is an association of sweet making with the milk caste, people who are associated with the milk and milk trading. caste group. So yes, caste and hierarchy informs a very, very important part of my monograph.
Thank you, Ishita. Uh, so I guess there are no more questions. Okay, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to our speaker for powering through in spite of being unwell. I can see it. And this recording should be uploaded to the Indian Sociological Society's YouTube channel very soon. And once it is uploaded, you can, view it at your own leisure. Thank you once again, Ishita, and we will be back in February in continuation of our monthly lecture series. So, see you in February.